Okay, hopefully we are online. Just getting a quick check from our fellow in the tech booth. And by tech booth, I mean a few rooms over. But in the meantime, we'll just double check a couple of things real quick before we get started. Hopefully somebody can hear us, particularly a certain somebody named Noah. If you could acknowledge your presence, Noah, in the chat, that would be awesome, so that way we know you're a thing. Or not. Pardon me, listeners, if you're out there, we're just waiting for a quick second to get confirmation that we are actually live, since our equipment... apparently we're a tad on the quiet side, at least my voice is. Alright, does that sound any better now? How about now, Noah? Any samplings, any thoughts, musings? Tell me your dreams. Wow, that came out a lot creepier than I intended. But, well, quiet or no, we were doing the best we got, so I'm just going to press forward. So, hello and welcome to our Virus Free Radio's finale of our reading of Bram Stoker's Dracula. When last we left our intrepid heroes, they were all getting ready to chase the Count to Varna, to the very gates of hell, and to best the beast. But knowing full well the whole time that Mina Harker was held in his sway. But a door opens both ways, and Mina might be the very secret weapon they need in order to defeat the evil beast. And I'm getting even confirmation now that we're apparently coming through a bit more loud and clear, so we are going to press forward. So, without further ado, folks, we give you the finale to Bram Stoker's Dracula, Chapter 25. Dr. Seward's Diary. 11 October, evening. Jonathan Archer has asked me to note this, as he says he is hardly equal to the task, and he wants an exact record kept. I think that none of us were surprised that when we were asked to see Mrs. Harker a little before the time of sunset. We have of late come to understand that sunrise and sunset are her times of peculiar freedom, when her old self can be manifest without any controlling force subduing or restraining her or inciting her to action. This mood or condition begins some half hour or more before actual sunrise or sunset, and lasts until either the sun is high or whilst the clouds are still aglow with the rays streaming above the horizon. At first there was a sort of negative condition, as if some tie were loosened, and then the absolute freedom quickly follows. When, however, the freedom ceases, the change back or relapse comes quickly, preceded only by a spell of warning silence. Tonight, when we met, she was somewhat constrained, and bore all the signs of an internal struggle. I put it down myself to her making a violent effort at the earliest instant she could do so. A very few minutes, however, gave her complete control of herself. Then, motioning her husband to sit beside her on the sofa where she was half reclining, she made the rest of us bring chairs up close, taking her husband's hand in hers, and began. We are all here together in freedom, for perhaps the last time. I know, dear, I know that you will always be with me to the end. This was to her husband, whose hand had, I could see, tightened on hers. In the morning, we go out on our task, and God alone knows what may be in store for any of us. You are going to be so good to us to take care of me with you. I know that all the brave, earnest men can do for a poor, weak woman, whose soul perhaps is lost. No, Not yet, but is at any rate at stake. You will do what you must. But you must remember that I am not as you are. There is a poison in my blood, in my soul, which may destroy me, which must destroy me, unless some relief comes to us. Oh, my friends, you know as well as I do that my soul is at stake, and though I know there is one way out for me, you must not, and I must not take it. She looked appealing to all of us in turn, beginning and ending with her husband. What is the way? Asked Van Helsing in a hoarse voice. What is that way which we must not, may not take? That I may die now, either by my own hand or that of another, before the greater evil is entirely wrought. I know, and you know, that were I once dead, you could and would set free my immortal spirit, even as you did my poor Lucy's. Were death, or the fear of death, the only thing that stood in the way, I would not shrink to die here now, amidst the friends who love me. But death is not all. I cannot believe that to die in such a case, when there is hope before us and a bitter task to be done, is God's will. Therefore I, on my part, give up here the certainty of eternal rest, and go out into the dark, where may be the blackest things that the world or the netherworlds holds. We were all silent, for we knew instinctively that this was only a prelude. The faces of the others were set, and Harker's grew ashen gray. Perhaps he guessed better than any of us what was coming. She continued. This is what I can give into the hotchpot. I could not but note the quaint legal phrase which she used in such a place, and with all seriousness. What will each of you give? Your lives, I know, she went on quickly. That is easy for brave men. Your lives are God's, and you can give them back to him. But what will you give to me? She looked again questioningly, but this time avoided her husband's face. Quincy seemed to understand. He nodded, and her face lit up. Then I shall tell you plainly what I want, for there must be no doubtful matter in this connection between us now. You must promise me, one and all, even you, my beloved husband, that should the time come, you will kill me. What is that time? The voice was Quincy, but it was low and strained. When you shall be convinced that I am so changed that it is better that I die, that I may live. When I am thus dead in flesh, then you will, without a moment's delay, drive a stake through me and cut off my head, or do whatever else may be wanting to give me rest. Quincy was the first to rise after the pause. He knelt down before her, and taking her hand, he said solemnly, I am only a rough fellow, who wasn't, and hasn't, perhaps, lived as a man should to win such a distinction. But I swear to you by all that I hold sacred and dear that, should the time ever come, I shall not flinch from the duty that you have set us. I promise to you that I shall make all certain, for if I am only doubtful, I shall take it, and that the time has come. My true friend, was all she could say amidst her fast-falling tears, as, bending over, she kissed his hand. I swear the same, my dear Madam Mina, said Van Helsing. And I, said Lord Godalming, each of them in turn kneeling to take their oath. I followed myself, then her husband turned to her, wan-eyed, and with a greenish pallor, which subdued the snowy whiteness of his hair, asked, And must I, too, make such a promise, O my wife? You too, my dearest, she said, with infinite yearning of pity in her voice and eyes. You must not shrink. You are our nearest and dearest, and all the world to me. Our souls are knit into one, for all life and all time. Think, dear, that there are times when brave men have killed their wives and their womankind to keep them from falling into the hands of the enemy. Their hands did not falter any more because those that they loved implored them to slay them. It is men's duty towards those whom they love in such times of sore trial. And, oh, my dear, if it is to be that I must meet death at any hand, let it be at the hand of him that loves me best. Dr. Van Helsing, I have not forgotten your mercy, in poor Lucy's case, to him who loved. She stopped with a flying blush and changed her phrase. To him who had best right to give her peace. If that time shall come again, I look to you to make it a happy memory of my husband's life, that it was his loving hand which set me free from the awful thrall upon me. Again, I swear, came the professor's resonant voice. Mrs. Harker smiled, positively smiled, as with a sigh of relief she leaned back and said, "And now, one word of warning, a warning which you must never forget. This time, if it ever come, may come quickly and unexpectedly, and in such a case you must lose no time in using your opportunity. At such a time I myself might be, nay, if the time ever comes, shall be leagued with your enemy against you. One more request." She became very solemn as she said this. "It is not vital and necessary like the other, but I want you to do one thing for me, if you will." We all acquiesced, but no one spoke. There was no need to speak. "I want you to read the burial service." She was interrupted by a deep groan from her husband, taking his hand in hers. She held it over her heart and continued, "You must read it over me some day. Whatever may be the issue of all this fearful state of things, it will be a sweet thought to all or for some of us. You, my dearest, will, I hope, read it. For then it will be in your voice, in my memory forever, come what may." "But, oh, my dear one," he pleaded, "death is afar off from you." "Nay," she said, holding up a warning hand. "I am deeper in death at this moment than if the weight of an earthly grave lay heavy upon me." "Oh, my wife, must I read it?" he said, before he began. "It would comfort me, my husband," was all she said, and he began to read, when she got the book ready. How could anyone tell of that strange scene? Its solemnity, its gloom, its sadness, its horror, and withal, its sweetness. Even a skeptic, who can see nothing but a travesty of bitter truth in anything holy or emotional, would have been melted to the heart had he seen the little group of loving and devoted friends kneeling around that stricken and sorrowing lady, or heard the tender passion of her husband's voice, as in tones so broken with emotion that often he had to pause. He read the simple and beautiful service from the burial of the dead. I cannot go on. Words and voice fail me. She was right in her instinct, strange as it was. Bizarre as it may be hereafter, seem even to us who felt its potent influence at the time. It comforted as much, and the silence, which sorrowed Mrs. Harker's coming relapse from her freedom of soul, did not seem so full of despair to any of us as we had dreaded. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 15 October, Varna. We left Charing Cross on the morning of the 12th, got to Paris the same night, and took the places secured for us in the Orient Express. We travelled night and day, arriving here at about 5 o'clock. Lord Godalming went to the consulate to see if any telegram have arrived for him, whilst the rest of us came to this hotel, the Odysseus. The journey may have had incidents. I was, however, eager to get on to care for them. Until Tsarina Catherine comes into port, there will be no interest for me in anything in the wide world. Thank God, Mina is well, and looks to be getting stronger. Her color is coming back. She sleeps a great deal. Throughout the journey, she slept nearly all the time. Before sunrise and sunset, however, she is very wakeful and alert, and has become a habit for Van Helsing to hypnotize her at such times. At first, some effort was needed, and he had to make many passes, but now she seems to yield at once, as if by habit, and scarcely any action is needed. He seems to have power at these particular moments to simply will, and her thoughts obey him. He always asks her what she can see and hear. She answers to the first, nothing. All is dark. And to the second, I can hear the waves lapping against the ship, and the water rushing by. Canvas and cordage strain the masts, and yards creak. The wind is high. I can hear it in the shrouds, and the bow throws back the foam. It is evident that the Tsarina Catherine is still at sea, hastening on her way to Varna. Lord Godalming has just returned. He had 4 telegrams, one each day since we started, and all to the same effect. That Tsarina Catherine had not been reported to Lloyd's from anywhere. He had arranged before leaving London that his agents would send him every day a telegram saying if the ship had been reported. He was to have a message even if it were not reported, so that he might be sure that there was a watch being kept at the other end of the wire. We'd had dinner and went to bed early. Tomorrow we are to see the Vice-Consul, and to see, if we can, about getting on board the ship as soon as she arrives. Van Helsing says that our chance will be to get on the boat between sunrise and sunset. The Count, even if he takes the form of a bat, cannot cross the running water of his own volition, and so cannot leave the ship. As he dare not change into man's form without suspicion, which he evidently wishes to avoid, he must remain in the box. If, then, we can come aboard after sunrise, he is at our mercy, for we can open the box and make sure of him, as we did poor Lucy before he wakes. What mercy he shall get from us will not count for much. We think that we will not have much trouble with officials or the seamen. Thank God, this is the country where bribery can do anything, and we are well supplied with money. We have only to make sure that the ship cannot come into port between sunset and sunrise without our being warned, and we shall be safe. Judge Moneybag will settle this case, I think. 16 October. Mina's report still the same. Lapping waves and rushing water, darkness and favoring winds. We are evidently in good time, and when we hear of the Tsarina Catherine, we shall be ready. As she must pass the Dardanelles, we are sure to have some report. 17 October. Everything is pretty well fixed now. I think, to welcome the Count on his return from his tour, Godalming told the shippers that he fancied that the box sent aboard might contain something stolen from a friend of his, and got a half consent that he might open it at his own risk. The owner gave him a paper telling the captain to give him every faculty in doing whatever he chose on board the ship, and also a similar authorization to his agent at Varna. We have seen the agent, who was much impressed with Godalming's kindly manner to him, and we are all satisfied that whatever he can do to aid our wishes will be done. We have already arranged what to do in case we get the box open. If the Count is there, Van Helsing and Seward will cut off his head at once and drive a stake through his heart. Morrison, Godalming, and I shall prevent interference, even if we have to use the arms which we have at the ready. The professor says that if we can so treat the Count's body, it will soon after fall to dust. In such case, there would be no evidence against us, in case any suspicion of murder were aroused. But even if it were not, we should stand or fall by our act, and perhaps some day this very script may be evidence to come between some of us and a rope. For myself, I should take the chance only too thankfully if it were to come. We mean to leave no stone unturned to carry out our intent. We have arranged with certain officials that the instant the Tsarina Catherine is seen, we are to be informed by a special messenger. 24 October. A whole week of waiting. Daily telegrams to Godalming, but only the same story, not yet reported. Mina's morning and evening hypnotic answer is unvaried. Lapping waves, washing water, creaking masts. Telegram, October 24th. Rufus Smith, Lloyd's, London, to Lord Godalming, care of HBM, Vice-Consul, Varna. Tsarina Catherine reported this morning from the Dardanelles. Dr. Seward's Diary. 25 October. How I miss my phonograph. To write this diary with a pen is irksome to me, but Van Helsing says I must. We were all wild with excitement yesterday when Godalmang got his telegram from Lloyd's. I know now what men feel in battle when the call to action is heard. Mrs. Harker, alone of our party, did not show any signs of emotion. After all, it is not strange that she did not, for we took special care not to let her know anything about it, and we all tried not to show any excitement when we were in her presence. In old days, she would, I'm sure, have noticed, no matter how we might have tried to conceal it. But in this way, she has greatly changed during the past 3 weeks. The lethargy grows upon her, and though she seems strong and well, it is getting back some of her color. Van Helsing and I are not satisfied. We talk of her often. We have not, however, said a word to the others. It would break poor Harker's heart, certainly his nerve, if he knew that we even had a suspicion on the subject. Van Helsing examines, he tells me, her teeth very carefully, while she is in the hypnotic condition, for he says that so long as they do not begin to sharpen, there is no active danger of a change in her. If this change should come, it should be necessary to take steps. We both know what those steps would have to be, though we do not mention our thoughts to each other. We should neither of us shrink from the task, awful though it is to contemplate. Euthanasia is an excellent and comforting word. I am grateful to whomever invented it. It is only about 24 hours' sail from the Dardanelles to here. At the rate the Tsarina Catherine has come from London, she should therefore arrive sometime in the morning. But as she cannot possibly get in before then, we are all about to retire early. We shall get up at 1 o'clock as to be ready. 25 October, noon. No news yet of the ship's arrival. Mrs. Harker's hypnotic report this morning was the same as usual, so it is possible that we may get news at any moment. We men are all in a fever of excitement, except Harker, who is calm. His hands are as cold as ice, and an hour ago I found him wetting the edge of a great Gurkha knife, which he now always carries with him. It will be a bad lookout for the Count if the edge of that kukri ever touches his throat, driven by that stern, ice-cold hand. Van Helsing and I were a little alarmed about Mrs. Harker today. About noon, she got into a sort of lethargy which we did not like, although we kept silence to the others. We were neither of us happy about it. She had been restless all morning, so that we were at first glad to know that she was sleeping. When, however, her husband mentioned casually that she was sleeping so soundly that he could not wake her, we went to her room to see for ourselves. She was breathing naturally, and looked so well and peaceful that we agreed that sleep was better for her than anything else. Poor girl. She has so much to forget that it is no wonder that sleep, even if it brings oblivion to her, does her good. Later. Our opinion was justified, for when a refreshing sleep of some hours she woke, she seemed brighter and better than she had been for days. At sunset she made the usual hypnotic report. Wherever he may be in the Black Sea, the Count is hurrying to his destination, to his doom, I trust. 26 October. Another day, and no tidings of the Tsarina Catherine. She ought to be here by now. That she is still journeying somewhere is apparent, for Mrs. Harker's hypnotic report at sunrise was still the same. It is possible that the vessel may be lying by at times for fog. Some of the steamers which come in last evening reported patches of fog both to the north and south of the port. We must continue our watching, as the ship may now be sighted at any moment. 27 October, noon. Most strange. No news yet of the ship we wait for. Mrs. Harker reported last night and this morning as usual, lapping waves and rushing water. Though she added, the waves were very faint. The telegrams from London have been the same. No further report. Van Helsing is terribly anxious, and told me that he fears the Count is escaping us. He added significantly, I do not like the lethargy of Madame Mina's. Souls and memories can do strange things during trance. I was about to ask him more, but Harker just then came in and he held up a warning hand. We must try tonight at sunset to make her speak more fully when in her hypnotic state. 28 October. Telegram. Rufus Smith, London, to Lord Godalming, care HBM, Vice Consul, Varna. Tsarina Catherine reported entering Galitz at 1 o'clock today. Dr. Seward's diary, 28 October. When the telegram came announcing the arrival in Galitz, I do not think it was such a shock to any of us as we might have expected. True, we did not know whence, or how, or when the bolt would come, but I think we all expected that something strange would happen. The delay of the arrival at Varna made us individually satisfied that things were not as we had been expected. We only waited to learn where the change would occur. Nonetheless, however, it was a surprise. I suppose that nature works on such a hopeful bias that we believe against ourselves that things will be as they ought to be, not as we should know that they will be. Transcendentalism is a beacon to the angels, even if it be a will-o-wisp to the man. It is an odd experience that we all took it differently. Van Helsing raised his hand over his head for a moment, as though in remonstrance with the Almighty, but he said not a word, and in a few seconds stood up, with his face sternly set. Lord Godalming grew very pale, and sat breathing heavily. I was myself half stunned, and looked in wonder at one after another. Quincey Morris tightened his belt with that quick movement which I knew so well. In our old wandering days, it meant action. Mrs. Harker grew ghastly pale, so that the scar on her forehead seemed to burn, but she folded her hands meekly and looked up in prayer. Harker smiled, actually smiled, the dark bitter smile of one who is without hope. But at the same time, his action belied his words, for his hands instinctively sought the hilt of his great knife and rested there. "When does the next train start for Galitz?" said Van Helsing to us generally. "At 6:30 tomorrow morning." We all started, for the answer came from Mrs. Harker. "How on earth do you know?" said Art. "You forget, or perhaps you do not know, though Jonathan does, and so does Dr. Van Helsing, that I am a train fiend. At home in Exeter, I always used to make up the timetables so as to be helpful to my husband. I found it so useful sometimes that I always make a study of the timetables now. I knew that if anything were to take us to Castle Dracula, we should go by Galitz, or at any rate through Bucharest. So I learned the times very carefully. Unhappily, there are not many to learn, as the only train tomorrow leaves, as I say." "Wonderful woman," murmured the professor. "Can't we get a special?" asked Lord Godalming. Van Helsing shook his head. "I fear not. This land is very different for yours or mine. Even if we did have a special, it would probably not arrive as soon as our regular train. Moreover, we have something to prepare. We must think. Now let us organize. You, friend Arthur, go to the train and get the tickets and arrange that all be ready for us to go in the morning. Do you, friend Jonathan, go to the agent of the ship and get from him the letters to the agent in Galitz, with authority to make the search of the ship just as it were here. Morris Quincey, you see the Vice Consul and get his aid with his fellow in Galitz, and all he can do to make our way smooth, so that no times be lost when over the Danube. John will stay with Madame Mina and me, and we shall consult. For so, if time be long, you may be delayed. It will not matter when the sun set, since I am here with Madame Mina to make report." "And I?" said Mrs. Harker brightly, more like her old self than she had been for many a long day. "Shall try to be of use in all ways, and shall think and write for you as I used to. Something is shifting from me in some strange way, and I feel freer than I have been of late." The three younger men looked happier at that moment, as they had seemed to realize the significance of her words, but Van Helsing and I, turning to each other, met each a grave and troubled glance. We said nothing at the time, however. When the three men had gone to their task, Van Helsing asked Mrs. Harker to look up the copy of the diaries and find him the part of Harker's journal in the castle. She went away to get it. When the door was shut upon her, he said to me, "We mean the same. Speak out." There is some change. It is a hope that makes me sick, for it may deceive us. Quite so. Do you know why I asked her to get the manuscript? No, said I, unless it was to get an opportunity of seeing me alone. You are in part right, friend John, but only in part. I want to tell you something, and, oh, my friend, I am making a great and terrible risk. But I believe it is right. In the moment when Madam Mina said those words that arrest both our understanding, an inspiration came to me. In the trance of 3 days ago, the Count sent her his spirit to read her mind, or more like he took her to see him in his earth box in the ship with water rushing, just as to go free at rise at the set of sun. He learned then that we were here, for she hath more to tell in her open life with eyes to see and ears to heed than he, shut, as he is, in his coffin box. Now we may make his most effort to escape us. At present, he want her not. He is sure that with so great a knowledge that she will come at his call, but cut her off, take her as he can do, out of his own power, so she can not come to him. Ah, there I have hope that our man-brains have been men so long that have not lost the grace of God, will come hither than his child-brain that lie in his tombs for centuries. We grow not yet to our stature, that do only the work of selfish and therefore small. Here comes Madam Mina, not a word to her of trance. She know it not, and it would overwhelm her and make despair just when we want her to have all hope, all courage, when most we want all her great brain, which is trained like a man's brain, but is of sweet woman and have a special power which the Count gave her, and which he cannot take away altogether, though he think not so. Hush, let me speak, and you shall learn. O John, my friend, we are in awful straits. I fear as I have never feared before. We can only trust the good God. Silence. Here she comes. I thought the professor was going to break down and have hysterics, just as when Lucy had died. But with a great effort he controlled himself, and was at perfect poise when Mrs. Harker tripped into the room, bright and happy-looking in the doing of work, seemingly forgetful of her misery. As she came in, she handed a number of sheets of typewriting to Van Helsing. He looked them over gravely, his face brightening up as he read. Then, holding the pages between finger and thumb, he said, "Friend John, to you with so much experience already, and you too, dear Madam Mina, that are young, here is a lesson. Do not fear ever to think. A half-thought has been buzzing often in my brain, but I fear to let him loose his wings. Here now, with more knowledge, I go back to where that half-thought come from, and find that he be no half-thought at all, that be a whole thought, though so young that he is not yet strong enough to use his little wings. Nay, like the ugly duck of my friend Hans Andersen, he be no duck at all, but a big swan thought that sail nobly on big wings. When the time come for him to try them, I read here, what Jonathan have written. That other of his race who, in later age, again and again, brought his forces over the great river into Turkey land, who, when he was beaten back, came again, and again, though he had to come alone from the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he alone could ultimately triumph. What does this tell us? Not much? No. The Count's child thoughts see nothing, therefore he speaks so free. Your man thoughts see nothing. My man thoughts see nothing till just now. No. But there comes another word from some who speak without thought, because she, too, know not what it mean, what it might mean. Just as there are elements which rest, yet when in nature's course they move on their way, and they touch, and then, poof, there comes a flash of light, heaven-wide, that blind and kill and destroy some, but that show up all earth for leagues and leagues. Is it not so? Well, I shall explain. To begin, Have you ever studied the philosophy of crime? Yes and no. You, John, yes, for it is a study of insanity. You, no, Madam Mina, for crime touch you not, but once. Still your mind works true, and argues not a particulari ad universale. There is this peculiarity in criminals. It is so constant in all countries and in all times that even police, who know not much from philosophy, come to know it empirically that is to be empiric. The criminal ways work at one crime. That is, the true criminal who seems to predestinate to crime, and who will none another. This criminal has not full man brain. He is clever and cunning and resourceful, but he is not of man stature as to brain. He be of child brain in much. Now this criminal of ours is predestinate to crime also. He too have child brain, and it is of the child to which we have done. The little bird, the little fish, the little animal learn not by principle, but empirically, and when we learn do too. Then there is to him the ground to start from to do more. Give me a fulcrum, and I shall move the word, said Archimedes. To do so once is the fulcrum whereby the child brain become man brain, until he have the purpose to do more. He continued to do the same again every time, just as he had done before. Oh, my dear, I see that your eyes are opened, and that you are lighting the flash now all the leagues. For Mrs. Harker began to clap her hands, and her eyes sparkled. He went on. Now you will speak. Tell us two dry men of science what you see with those bright eyes. He took her hand and held it while he spoke. His finger and thumb closed on her pulse, as though instinctively and as unconsciously as she spoke. The Count is a criminal, and of the criminal type. Nordu and Lambrosco would so classify him as a criminal, as he is imperfectly formed mind. Thus, in a difficulty, he has to seek resource in habit. His past is a clue, and the one page of it we know, and that from his own lips, tells us that once before, when in what Mr. Morris would call a tight place, he went back to his own country from the land he had tried to invade, and thence, without losing purpose, prepared himself for a new effort. He came again better equipped for his work, and won. So he came to London to invade a new land. He was beaten, and when all hope of success was lost, and his existence in danger, he fled back over the sea to his home, just as he had formerly fled back over the Danube from Turkeyland. Good, good. Oh, so clever, lady, said Van Helsing enthusiastically, as he stopped and kissed her hand. A moment later he said to me as calmly as though he had been having a sick room consultation. 72 only, and in all this excitement I have hope. Turning to her again, he said with keen expectation, But go on, go on. There is more to tell if you will. Be not afraid. John and I know. I do in any case, and shall tell you if you are straight. Speak without fear. I will try to, but you will forgive me if I seem egotistical. Nay, fear not. You must be egotist, for it is of what we think. Then, as he is a criminal, he is selfish, and as his intellect is small, and his action is based on selfishness, he confines himself to one purpose. That purpose is remorseless. As he fled back over the Danube, leaving his forces to be cut to pieces, so now he is intent on being safe, careless of all. So his own selfishness frees my soul somewhat from the terrible power which he acquired over me on that dreadful night. I felt it. Oh, I felt it, thank God for his great mercy. My soul is freer than it has been since that awful hour, and all that haunts me is a fear that in some poor trance or dream he may have used my knowledge for his ends. The professor stood up. He has so used your mind, and by it he has left us here in Varna, whilst the ship that carried him rushed through the enveloping fog up to Galitz, where, doubtless, he made preparation for escaping from us. But his child mind only saw so far, and it may be that, as ever in God's providence, the very thing that the evildoer most reckoned on for his own selfish good turns out to be his chiefest harm. The hunter is taken in his own snare, as the great psalmist said. For now, as he think he is free from any trace of us, and that he has escaped us with so many hours to him, when his selfish child brain will whisper him to sleep. He think, too, that he has cut himself off from knowing your mind. There can be no knowledge of him to you. There is where he fail. That terrible baptism of blood, which he gave you, makes you free to go to him in spirit, as you have yet done in your dreams and times of freedom, when the sun rise and set. At such times you go by my volition and not by his, and this power to good of you and others, as you have won from your suffering hands. This is now all the more precious that he know it not, and to guard himself he has even cut himself off from his knowledge of our where. We, however, are not selfish, and we believe that God is with us in all this blackness, and that these many dark hours we shall follow him, and we shall not flinch, even if we peril ourselves, that we become like him. Friend John, this has been a great hour. It have done much to advance us on our way. You must scribe and write them all down, so that when others return from their work, you can give it to them. Then they shall know as we do. And so I have written this whilst we wait for their return, and Mrs. Harker has written with her typewriter all since she has brought the MS to us. That brings us to the end of chapter 25, folks. The chase begins. But even when chasing the devil, I require a bit of tea to carry on. In all things, civility. I'll admit I've been having a grand time doing this, and with only 2 chapters to go, I'm almost loath to end it. But we must carry on our way. Excuse me. So, feeling frosty, Ryan? I think that's a yes. So, with one last sip of my tea, let us continue with chapter 26 of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Dr. Seward's Diary, 29 October. This is written in the train from Varna to Galitz. Last night we all assembled a little before the time of sunset. Each of us had done his work as best we could. So far as thought and endeavor and opportunity go, we are prepared for the whole of our journey, and our work when we get to Galitz. When the usual time came round, Mrs. Harker prepared herself for her hypnotic effort, and after a longer and more serious effort on the part of Van Helsing than had usually been necessary, she sank into trance. Usually, she speaks on a hint, but this time the professor had to ask her questions, and to ask them pretty resolutely before we could learn anything. At last her answer came. I can see nothing. We are still. There are no waves lapping, but only a steady swirl of water softly running against the Hanser. I can hear men's voices calling near and far, and the roar and creak of oars on the roll-walks. A gun is fired somewhere. The echo of it seems far away. There is a tramping of feet overhead, and ropes and chains are dragged along. What is this? There is a gleam of light. I can feel the air billowing upon me. Here she stopped. She had risen, as if impulsively, from where she lay on the sofa, and raised both her hands, palms upward, as if lifting a weight. Van Helsing and I looked at each other with understanding. Quincy's raised his eyebrows slightly and looked at her intently, whilst Harker's hand instinctively closed around the hilt of his blade. There was a long pause. We all knew that the time when she could speak was passing, but that we felt that it was useless to say anything. Suddenly she sat up, and as she opened her eyes, she said sweetly, Would none of you like a cup of tea? You must all be so tired. We could only make her happy, and so acquiesced. She bustled off to get tea. When she had gone, Van Helsing said, "You see, my friends, he is close to land. He has left his earth chest, but he is yet to get on shore. In the night, he may lie hidden somewhere. But if he be not carried on to shore, or if the ship do not touch it, he cannot achieve the land. In such case, he can, if it be in the night, change his form, and can jump or fly on the shore, as he did at Whitby. But if the day come before he get on shore, then, unless he be carried, he cannot escape. And if he be carried, then the customs men may discover what the box contain. Thus, in fine, if he cannot escape not on shore tonight, or before dawn, there will be a whole day lost to him. We may then arrive in time, for if he escape not at night, we shall come in him in the daytime, boxed up and at our mercy, for he dare not be his true self, awake and visible, lest he be discovered." There was no more to be said, so we waited in patience until the dawn, at which time we might learn more from Mrs. Harker. Early this morning we listened, with breathless anxiety, for her response in her trance. The hypnotic stage was even longer in coming than before, and when it came, the time remaining until full sunrise was so short that we began to despair. Van Helsing seemed to throw his whole soul into the effort, at least. In obedience to his will, she made reply, "It is dark. All is dark. I hear lapping water level with me, and some creaking, as wood on wood." She paused, and the red sun shot up. "We must wait until tonight." And so it is that we are traveling towards Galitz in an agony of expectation. We are due to arrive between 2 and 3 in the morning, but already at Bucharest we are 3 hours late, so we cannot possibly get in until well after sunup. Thus, we shall have 2 more hypnotic messages from Mrs. Harker. Either or both may possibly throw light on what is happening. Later. Sunset has come and gone. Fortunately, it came at a time when there was no distraction, for it had occurred whilst we were at a station. We might not have secured the necessary calm and isolation otherwise. Mrs. Harker yielded to the hypnotic trance influence even less readily than this morning. I am in fear that her power of reading the Count's sensations may die away just when we want it most. It seems to me that her imagination is beginning to work. While she has been in trance hitherto, she confined herself to the simplest of facts. If this goes on, it may ultimately mislead us. If I thought that the Count's power over her would die away equally with her power of knowledge, it would be a happy thought, but I am afraid that it may not be so. When she did speak, her words were enigmatic. "Something is going out. I can feel it pass me like a cold wind. I can hear far off, confused sounds, as of men talking in strange tongue, fierce falling water, and the howling of wolves." She stood, and a shudder ran through her, increasing in intensity for a few seconds, till, at the end, she shook as though in a palsy. She said no more, even in answer to the professor's imperative questioning. When she woke from the trance, she was cold and exhausted, and languid, but her mind was all alert. She could not remember anything, but asked what she had said. When she was told, she pondered over it deeply for a long time and in silence. 30 October, 7 a.m. We are near Galitz now, and I may not have time to write later. Sunrise this morning was anxiously looked upon for by us all. Knowing of the increasing difficulty of procuring the hypnotic trance, Van Helsing began his passes earlier than usual. They produced no effect, however, until the regular time, when she yielded with a still greater difficulty, only a minute before the sun rose. The professor lost no time in his questioning. Her answer came with equal quickness. "All is dark. I hear water swirling by, level with my ears, and the creaking of wood on wood. Cattle, low, far off. There is another sound, A queer one, like... She stopped and grew white, and whiter still. Go on, go on. Speak, I command you, said Van Helsing in an agonized voice. At the same time there was despair in his eyes, for the risen sun was reddening even Mrs. Harker's pale face. She opened her eyes, and we all started, as she said sweetly, and seemingly with the utmost concern, "Oh, Professor, why ask me to do what you know I can't? I don't remember anything." Then, seeing the look of amazement on her faces, she said, turning from one to another with a troubled look, "What have I said? What have I done? I know nothing, only that I was lying here, half asleep, and heard you say, 'Go on, speak, I command you.' It seems so funny to hear you order me about as if I were a bad child." "Oh, Madam Mina," he said sadly, it's proof be needed, but of how I love and honor you, with a word for your good, spoken more earnest than ever, can seem so strange, because it is to order her to whom I am proud to obey. The whistles are sounding. We are nearing Galitz. We are on fire with anxiety and eagerness. Mina Harker's Journal, 30 October. Mr. Morris took me to a hotel, where our rooms had been ordered by telegraph. He being the one who could be best spared, since he does not speak any foreign language. The forces were distributed much as they had been at Varna, except that Lord Godalming went to the Vice-Consul, as his rank might serve him an immediate guarantee of some sort to the official, we being in an extreme hurry. Jonathan and the two doctors went to the shipping agent to learn particulars of the arrival of the Tsarina Catherine. Later, Lord Godalming has returned. The council is away, and the vice-consul is sick, so the routine work has been attended to by a clerk. He was very obliging and offered to do anything in his power. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 30 October. At 9 o'clock, Dr. Van Helsing, Dr. Seward, and I called upon Messrs. Mackenzie and Steinkopf, the agents of the London firm of Hapsgood. They had received a wire from London, in answer to Lord Godalming's telegraph request, asking us to show them any civility in their power. They are more than kind and courteous, and took us at once on board the Tsarina Catherine, which lay at anchor out in the river harbor. Here we saw the captain, Doslin by name, who told us of his voyage. He said that all in his life he had never had so favorable a run. Man, he said, but it made us afraid, for we expected that we would have to pay for it with some piece of ill luck, as to keep up the average. It's no canny to run straight from London to the Black Sea with a wind as though the devil himself were blowing on your sail for some purpose. And at the same time we could not spare a thing. When we were nigh a ship, nor a port, nor a headland, a fog fell on us and travelled with us, till when after it had lifted and looked out, the dull thing we could see. We ran by Gibraltar, without being able to signal, until we came to the Dardanelles and had to wait to get our permit to pass. We never were within hail of aught. At first I inclined to slack off sail and beat about till the fog was lifted. But whilst I thought that if the devil was Midas to get us to the Black Sea quick, he was like to do it whether we would or no. If we had a quick voyage, it would be not to our miscredit with the owners, nor to hurt our traffic. But the old man who had served its purpose was grateful to us for not hindering him. This mixture of sympathy and cunning, of superstition and commercial reasoning, aroused Van Helsing, who said, "Mein friend, that devil is more clever than he is thought by some, and he know that he has met his match." The skipper was not displeased with the compliment, and went on. When we got past the Bosphorus, the men began to grumble. Some of them, the Romanians, came and asked me to heave overboard a big box which had been put on board by a queer-looking old man just before we'd started from London. I had seen them spirit the fellow, and put out 12 fingers when they saw him, to guard against the evil eye. Man, but the superstition of foreigners is perfectly ridiculous. I tell them about their business pretty quick, but just as after the fog closed on us, I felt a wee bit as they did something, though I wouldn't say it was because of the big box. Well, on we went, and as the fog didn't let up for 5 days, I just let the wind carry us, for the devil wanted to get somewheres. Well, he would fetch us up anyway. And if he didn't, well, we'd hit a sharp lookout anyhow. Sure enough, we had a fair way in deep water all the time, and 2 days ago, when the morning sun came through the fog, we found ourselves just in the river opposite Galitz. The Romanians were wild and wanted me, right or wrong, to take out the box and fling it into the river. I had to angry with them about them with a handspike, and then when the last of them rose off the deck, head in his hand, I had convinced them that, evil eye or no evil eye, the property and the trust of my owners were better in the hands than in the river Danube. They had, mind ye, taken the box on deck, ready to fling in, and as was marked Galitz via Varna, I thought I'd let it lie till we discharged in the port and get rid of it altogether. We didn't do much clearing that day, and had to remain an anchor, but in the morning, brew up early, an hour before sunup, a man came aboard with an order written to him from England to receive a box marked for one Count Dracula. Sure enough, the matter was one ready to his hand. He had his papers all set, and glad I was to be rid of the damn thing, for I was beginning to feel uneasy with it. If the Dale did have any luggage aboard ship, I'm thinking it was neither that nor the same. What was the name of the man who took it? Asked Dr. Van Helsing with restrained eagerness. I'll be telling you quick, he answered, and stepping down to his cabin, produced a receipt signed Emanuel Hedelsum, Bergenstrasse 16, was the address. We found out that this was all the captain knew, so with thanks we came away. We found Hedelsum in his office, a Hebrew of rather the Adelphi theater type, with a nose like a sheep and a fez. His arguments were pointed with specie, we doing the punctuation, and with a little bargaining he told us what he knew. This turned out to be simple but important. He had received a letter from Mr. Deville of London, telling him to receive, if possible, before sunrise, so as to avoid customs, a box which would arrive at Galitz in the Tsarina Catherine. This he is to give charge to a certain Petrov Stansky, who dealt with the Slovaks who traded down the river to the port. He had been paid for his work by an English banknote, which had been duly cashed for gold at the Danube International Bank. When Stansky came to him, he had taken him to the ship and handed over the box, so as to save porterage. That was all he knew. We then sought for Skansky, but were unable to find him. One of his neighbors, who did not seem to bear him any affection, said he had gone away 2 days before, and no one knew whither. This was corroborated by his landlord, who had received by messenger the key of the house together with the rent due in English money. This had been between 10 and 11 o'clock last night. We are at a standstill again. Whilst we're talking, one came running breathlessly, gasped out that the body of Stansky had been found inside the wall of the churchyard of St. Peter, that the throat had been torn open as if by some wild animal. Those we had been speaking with ran off to see the horror, the women crying out, "This is the work of a Slovak!" We hurried away, lest we should have been somehow drawn into the affair, and so detained. As we came home, we could arrive at no definite conclusion. We were all convinced that the Bach was on its way by water to somewhere, but where that might be we had yet to discover. With heavy hearts we came home to the hotel to Mina. When we met together, the first thing was to consult as to asking Mina again into our confidence. Things are getting desperate, and it is at least a chance, though a hazardous one. As a preliminary step, I was released from my promise to her. Mina Harker's journal. 30 October, evening. They were so tired and worn out and dispirited that there was nothing to be done till they had some rest. So I asked them all to lie down for half an hour, whilst I should enter everything up to that moment. I feel so grateful to the men who invented the traveler's typewriter, and to Mr. Morris for getting me this one for me. I should have felt quite astray doing work if I'd had to write this all with pen. It is all done. Poor, dear, dear Jonathan. What he must have suffered. What he must be suffering now. He lies on the sofa, hardly seeming to breathe, and his whole body appears in collapse. His brows are knit. His face is drawn with pain. Poor fellow, maybe he is thinking, and I can see his face all wrinkled up with the concentration of his thoughts. Oh, if only I could help it all. I shall do what I can. I have asked Dr. Van Helsing, and he has got me all the papers that I have not yet seen. Whilst they are resting, I shall go over carefully, and perhaps I may arrive at some conclusion. I shall try to follow the professor's example, and think without prejudice on the facts before me. I do believe that under God's providence I have made a discovery. I shall get the maps and look over them. I am more sure than ever that I am right. My new conclusion is ready, so I shall get our party together and read it. They can judge it. It is well to be accurate, and every minute is precious. Mina Harker's memorandum, entered in her journal. Ground of inquiry. Count Dracula's problem is to get back to his own place. A. He must be brought back by someone. This is evidence, for he had power to move himself as he wished, to go as any man or wolf or bat, or in some other way. He evidently fears discovery or interference in the state of in helplessness in which he must be, confined as he is between dawn and sunset in his wooden box. How is he to be taken? Here, a process of exclusions may help us. By road, by rail, by water. By road, there are endless difficulties, especially in leaving the city. First, there are people, and people are curious and investigate. A hint, a surmise, a doubt as to what might be in the box would destroy him. 2. There are, or may be, customs and other officers to pass. And finally, his pursuers might follow. This is his highest fear. In order to prevent his being betrayed, he has replied, so far as he can, even his victim, me. He has repelled his victim, I beg your pardon. Second option, by rail. There is no one in charge of the box. It would have to take its chance of being delayed, and delay would be fatal with enemies on the track. True, he might escape at night, but what would he be, if left in a strange place with no refuge that he could fly to? This is not what he intends, and does not mean to risk it. By water. Here is the safest way, in one respect, but with most danger in another. On the water he is powerless except at night. Even then he can only summon fog and storm and snow and his wolves. But were he wrecked, the living water would engulf him, helpless, and he would indeed be lost. He could have the vessel drive to land, but if it were unfriendly land, wherein he is not free to move, his position would still be desperate. We know from the record that he is on the water, so what we have to do is ascertain what water. The first thing is to realize exactly what he has done as yet. We may then get light on what this latter task may be. Firstly, we must differentiate between what he did in London as part of his general plan of action when he was pressed for moments and had to arrange as best he could. Secondly, we must see, as well as we can surmise from the facts, what we know of and what he has done before. As to the first, he evidently intended to arrive at Galitz and send envoys to Varna to deceive us, lest we should ascertain his means of escape from England. His immediate and sole purpose was to escape. The proof of this is the letter of instruction sent to Emanuel Hittelstein to clear and take away the box before sunrise. There is also the instruction to Petrov Stansky. These we must only guess at, but must have been some letter or message since Stansky came to Hiddleston. That so far, his plans were successful, we know. The Tsarina Catherine made a phenomenally quick journey, so much so that Captain Donaldson's suspicions were aroused. But his superstition, united with his canniness, played the Count's game for him, and he ran with his favoring winds through the fog, and all till he brought up blindfold at Galitz. That the Count arrangements were well made has been proved. Hiddleston cleared the box, took it off, gave it to Stansky. Stansky took it, and there we lose the trail. We only know that the box is somewhere on the water moving along. The customs and other officers, if there be any, have been avoided. Now we come to what the Count must have done after his arrival, on land at Galitz. The box was to be given to Stansky before sunrise. At sunrise, the Count could appear in his own form. Here we ask why Stansky was chosen at all to aid in the work. In my husband's diary, Stansky is mentioned as dealing with the Slovaks who trade down the river to the port, and the man's remark that the murder was the work of a Slovak showed the general feeling against his class. The Count wanted isolation. My surmise is this, that in London the Count decided to get back to his castle by water as the most safe and secret way. He was brought from the castle by Stansky and probably delivered there by cargo to Slovaks who took boxes to Varna for to be shipped to London. Thus the Count had knowledge of persons who could arrange his service. When the box was on land, before sunrise or after sunset, he came out of his box, met Stansky, and instructed him what to do as to arranging the carriage of the box up some river. When this was done, he knew that all was on the train. He blotted out his traces, as he thought, by murdering his agent. I have examined the map and find that the river most suitable for the Slovaks to have ascended is either the Pruth or the Cerneth. I read in the transcript that in my trance I heard cows low and water swirling level with my ears and the creaking of wood. The Count in his box, then, was on a river in an open boat, propelled probably either by oars or poles, for the banks were near, and it was working against the stream. There would be no such sound if floating downstream. Of course, it may not be either Sereth or the Pruth. We may need to possibly investigate further. Now, of these two, the Pruth is the more easily investigated, but the Cerneth at Fundu, joined by the Britsa, which runs up the Borgo Pass. The loop it makes is manifestly as close to Dracula's castle as can be got by water. Mina Harker's journal continued. When I had done reading, John took me in his arms and kissed me. The others kept shaking me by both hands, and Dr. Van Helsing said, "Our dear Madam Mina is once again our teacher. Her eyes have been where we were blinded. Now we are on the track once again, and this time we may succeed. Our enemy is at his most helpless, and if we come on him by day on water, our task will be over. He has a start, but he is powerless to hasten. As he may not leave his box, lest those who carry him may suspect. For them to suspect would be prompt them to throw him into the stream where he perish. This he knows, and will not. Now men to our council of war, for here and now we must plan what each shall do." "I shall get a steam launch and follow him," said Lord Godalming. "And I, horses to follow on the bank, lest by chance he land," said Mr. Morris. "Good," said Professor, "both good. But neither must go alone. There must be force to overcome if force and need be. The Slovak is strong and rough, and he carries rude arms." All the men smiled, for amongst them they carried a small arsenal. Said Mr. Morris, "I've brought some Winchesters. They're pretty handy in a crowd, and there may be wolves. The Count, if you remember, took some other precautions. He made some requisitions on others that Mrs. Harker could not quite hear or understand. We must be ready at all points." Dr. Seward said, "I think I had better go with Quincy. We have been accustomed to hunt together, and we too, well armed, will be a match for whatever may come along. You must not go alone, Art. It may be necessary to fight the Slovaks, and a chance thrust, for I don't suppose these fellows carry guns, would undo all our plans. There must be no chances this time. We shall not rest until the Count's head and body have been separated, and we are sure that he cannot reincarnate. He looked at Jonathan as he spoke, and Jonathan looked at me. I could see that the poor dear was torn about in his mind. Of course he wanted to be with me, but then the boat service would most likely be the one which would destroy the vampire. Why did I hesitate to write that word? He was silent a while, and during his silence Dr. Van Helsing spoke. Friend Jonathan, this is to you for twice reasons. First, because you are young and brave and can fight, and all energies may be needed at the last. And again, this is your right to destroy him, that which has wrought such woe to you and yours. Be not afraid for Madam Mina. She will be my care, if I may. I am old. My legs are not so quick to run at once, and I am not used to ride so long, or to pursue as need be, or to fight with lethal weapons. But I can be of other service. I can fight in another way, and I can die, if need be, as well as younger men. Now let me say that I would in this, while you, my Lord Godalming, and friend Jonathan, go in your swift little steamboat up the river, and whilst John and Quincy guard the bank, where perchance he might be landed, I will take Madam Mina right into the heart of the enemy's country, while the old fox is tied in his box, floating on the running stream whence he cannot escape to land, where he dares not rise the lid of his box, lest his Slovak carriers should fear or leave him to perish. We shall go on the track where Jonathan went, from Beatrice over to the Bargo, and find our way to Castle of Dracula. Here Madam Mina's hypnotic power will surely help, and we shall find our way, all dark and unknown otherwise. After the first sunrise, when we are near the fateful place, there is much to be done, and other places to be made sanctify, so that the nest of vipers be obliterated. Here Jonathan interrupted him hotly. Do you mean to say, Professor Van Helsing, that you would bring Mina, in her sad case, and tainted as she is, with the devil's illness, right into the jaws of his death trap? Not for the world, not for heaven or hell. He became almost speechless for a minute, and then went on. Do you know what that place is? Have you seen that awful den of hellish infamy? With the very moonlight alive with grisly shapes, and every speck of dust that whirls in the wind a devouring monster in embryo? Have you felt the vampire's lips on your throat? Here he turned to me, as his eyes lit upon my forehead, and threw his arms with a cry. Oh my God, what have we done to have this terror upon us? He sank down in the sofa in collapse of misery. The professor's voice, as he spoke in clear, sweet tones, which seemed to vibrate the air, calmed us all. Oh, my friend, it is because I would save Madam Mina from that awful place that I would go. God forbid that I should take her into that place. There is work, wild work to be done there, that our eyes may not see. We men here, all save Jonathan, have seen with our own eyes what it is to be done before that place can be purified. Remember that we are in terrible straits. If the Count escape us this time, and he is strong and subtle and cunning, he may choose to sleep him for a century, and then, in time, our dear one, he shook my hand, would come to him to keep him company, and would be as those others that you, Jonathan, saw. You have told us of their gloating lips. You heard their ribald laugh as they clutched the moving bag the Count threw at them. You shudder, and may well it be. Forgive me that I make you so much pain, but it is necessary. My friend, it is not a dire need for which the place I am giving, possibly my life. If it were that anyone went into the place to stay, it is I who would go to keep him company. Do as you will, said Jonathan, with a sob that shook him all over. We are in the hands of God. Later. Oh, it did me good to see the way that these brave men worked. How can women help loving men when they are so earnest, so true, and so brave? And two, it made me think of wonderful power of money. What can not do when it is properly applied? And what might it do when basely used? I felt so thankful that Lord Godalming is rich, and that both he and Mr. Morris, who also has plenty of money, are willing to spend it so freely. For if they did not, our little expedition could not start, either so promptly or so well equipped, as within another hour. It is not 3 hours since we arrived that each part of us has our part to do, and now Lord Godalming and Jonathan have a lovely steam launch, with steam up ready to start at a moment's notice. Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris have half a dozen good horses, well appointed. We all have the maps and appliances of our various kinds to be at hand. Professor Van Helsing and I are to leave by the 11:40 train tonight to Versailles. We are to get a carriage and to drive to the Borgo Pass. We are bringing a good deal of ready money, as we are to buy carriage and horses. We shall drive ourselves, for we have no one whom we can trust in the matter. The professor knows something of a great many languages, so we shall get on all right. We have got all arms, even for me, a large bore revolver. Jonathan would not be happy unless I was armed like the rest. Alas, I cannot carry one arm that the rest do. The scar on my forehead forbids that. Dear Dr. Van Helsing comforts me by telling me that I am fully armed, as there will be wolves. The weather is getting colder by the hour, and there are snow flurries, which come and go as warnings. Later. It took all my courage to say goodbye to my darling. We may never meet again. Courage, Mina. The professor is looking at you keenly. His look is a warning. There must be no tears now, unless it may be that God will let them fall in gladness. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 30 October. Night. I am writing this in the light of the furnace door of the steam launch. Lord Godalming is firing it up. He is an experienced hand at the work, for he had years of a launch of his own on the Thames, and another at the Norfolk Broads. Regarding our plans, we finally decided that Mina's guess was correct, and that if any waterway was chosen by the Count's escape back to the castle, the Sereth and then the Biritza at its junction would be the one. We took it that somewhere about the 47th degree north latitude would be the place chosen for the crossing between the river and the Carpathians. We have no fear in running at good speed up the river at night. There is plenty of water, and the banks are wide enough apart to make steaming even in the dark easy enough. Lord Godalming tells me to sleep for a while, as there is for the present for one to be on watch. But I cannot sleep. How can I sleep with the terrible danger hanging over my darling, and her going out into that awful place? My only comfort is that we are in the hands of God. Only for that faith it would be easier to die than to live, and to be quit of all the trouble. Mr. Morris and Dr. Seward were off on their long ride before we started. They are to keep up the right bank, far enough off to get on higher lands where they can see a good stretch of river and avoid the flowing of its curves. They have, for the first stages, 2 men to ride and lead their spare horses, 4 in all, so as to not excite curiosity. When they dismiss the men, which shall be shortly, they shall themselves look after the horses. It may be necessary for us to join forces. If so, they can mount our whole party. Once one of the saddles has a removable horn and can be easily adapted for Mina if required. It is a wild adventure we are on. Here, as we are rushing through the darkness, with the cold from the river seeming to rise up and strike us, with all the mysterious voices of the night around us, it all comes home. We seem to be drifting into unknown places and unknown ways, into a whole world of dark and dreadful things. Godalming is shutting the furnace door. 31st October. Still hurrying along. The day has come, and Godalming is sleeping. I am on watch. The morning is bitterly cold. The furnace heat is grateful, though we have heavy fur coats. As yet, we have passed only a few open boats. None of them had on board any box or package of anything like the size the one we seek. The men were scared every time we turned our electric lamp on them and fell on their knees and prayed. 1st November, evening. No news all day. We have found nothing of the kind we seek. We have now passed in the Britsa, and if we are wrong in our surmise, our chance is gone. We have overhauled every boat, big and little. Early this morning, one crew took us for a government boat and treated us accordingly. We saw this as a way of smoothing matters, so at Fundu, where the Britsa runs in the Sereth, we got a Romanian flag which we now fly conspicuously. With every boat which we overhauled since then, this trick has succeeded. We have every deference shown to us, and not once any objection whatsoever as to what we ask or do. Some of the Slovaks tell us that a big boat passed them, going at more than usual speed, as she had doubled crew on board. This was before they came to Fundu, so they could tell us as to whether the boat turned into the Britsa or continued up the Sereth. At Fundu we could not hear of any such boat, so she must have passed there in the night. I am feeling very sleepy. The cold is perhaps beginning to tell upon me, and nature must have rest sometime. Godalming insists that he shall keep the first watch. God bless him for all his goodness to poor dear Mina and me. 2nd November, morning. It is broad daylight. That good fellow would not wake me. He said as it would have been a sin to do so, for I slept peacefully and was forgetting my trouble. It seems brutally selfish to me to have slept so long, and I let him watch all night. But he was quite right. I am a new man this morning, and as I sit here and watch him sleeping, I can do all that is necessary as to the minding of the engine, steering, and keeping watch. I can feel that my strength and my energy are coming back to me. I wonder where Mina is now, and Van Helsing. They would have got to Varese at about noon on Wednesday. It would take them some time to get the carriage and the horses, so if they had started and traveled hard, they would be about now at the Borgo Pass. God hide and help them. I am afraid to think what may happen. If we could only go faster, but we cannot. The engines are throbbing and doing their utmost. I wonder how Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris are getting on. There seem to be endless streams running down the mountains into this river, but as none of them are very large, at present, at all events, though they are terrible doubtless in winter when the snow falls, the horsemen may not have met much obstruction. I hope that before we can get to Srebrenica, we may see them, for if by that time we are not overtaken the Count, it may be necessary to take counsel together as to what to do next. Dr. Seward's diary, 2nd November. 3 days on the road. No news, no time to write, if there had been, for any moment is precious. We have had only the rest needful for the horses. We are both bearing it wonderfully. Those adventurous days of ours are turning up useful. We must push on. We shall never feel happy till we get the launch in sight again. 3rd November. We heard at Fundu that the launch had gone up the Britsa. I wish it wasn't so cold. There are signs of snow coming, and if it falls heavy will stop us. In such case, we must sledge and go on, the Russian fashion. 4th November. Today, we heard of a launch having been detained by an accident when trying to force a way up the rapids. The Slovak boats get up all right by aid of a rope and steering with knowledge. Some went up only a few hours before. Godalming is an amateur fitter himself, and evidently it was he who put the launch in trim again. Finally, they got up the rapids all right, with local help, and are off on the chase afresh. I fear that the boat is not any better for the accident. The peasantry tell us that she got open smooth water again. She kept stopping every now and again so long as she was in sight. We must push on harder than ever. Our help may be wanted soon. Mina Harker's Journal. 30th October. Arrived at Veresi at noon. The professor tells me that this morning at dawn he could hardly hypnotize me at all, and that all I could say was dark and quiet. He's off now buying carriage and horses. He says that he will later try to buy additional horses so that may be able to change them on the way. We have something more than 70 miles before us. The country is lovely and most interesting, if only if it were under different conditions. How delightful it would be to see it all. If Jonathan and I were driving through it alone, what a pleasure it would be. To stop and see people, learn something of their life, and to fill our minds and memories with all the color and picturesqueness of the whole world, beautiful country, and the quaint people. But, alas. Later. Dr. Van Helsing has returned. He's got the carriage and horses, and we are to have some dinner and start in an hour. The landlady is putting us up a huge basket of provisions. It seems enough for a company of soldiers. The professor encourages her and whispers to me that it may be a week before we can get any food again. He's been shopping too, and has sent home such a wonderful lot of fur coats and wraps, and all sorts of warm things. There will not be any chance of our getting cold. We shall soon be off. I am afraid to think what may happen to us. We are truly in the hands of God. He alone knows what may be, and I pray him, with all his strength of my sad and humble soul, that he will watch over my beloved husband, whatever may happen. Jonathan may know that I loved him and honored him more than I can say, and that my latest and truest thought will always be for him. And that brings us to the end of our penultimate chapter, folks. One more, and we will find out how this tale of terror comes to its conclusion. But clearing of the throat and fashioning of the tea, bracing of the hands. Well, I could prattle on. What do you say we put this thing to bed, eh, Ryan? Alrighty then. Well then, folks, let's wrap this up with Chapter 27 of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Mina Harker's Journal. 1st November. All day long we have traveled, and at good speed. The horses seem to know that they are being kindly treated, for they go willingly at their full stage at best speed. We have now had so many changes, and find the same thing so consistently, that we are encouraged to think that the journey will be an easy one. Dr. Van Helsing is laconic. He tells the farmers that he is hurrying to Beatrice, and pays them well to make the exchange of horses. We get hot soup or coffee or tea, and off we go. It is a lovely country, full of beauties of all imaginable kinds, and people are very brave and strong and simple, and seem full of nice qualities. They are very, very superstitious. In the first house where we stopped, when the woman who served us first saw the scar on my forehead, she crossed herself and put 2 fingers toward me to keep off the evil eye. I believe they went to the trouble of putting an extra amount of garlic into our food, and I can't abide garlic. Ever since then, I've taken care not to take off my hat or veil, and so have escaped their suspicions. We are traveling fast, and as we have no driver with us to carry tales, we go ahead of scandal. But I dare say that fear of the evil eye will follow hard behind us all the way. The professor seems tireless. All day he would not take any rest, though he made me sleep for a long spell. At sunset time, he hypnotized me, and he says that I answered as usual: darkness, lapping water, and creaking wood. And so our enemy is still on the river. I'm afraid to think that Jonathan, but somehow I have no fear of him, or for myself. I write this whilst we wait in a farmhouse for the horses to get ready. Dr. Van Helsing is sleeping. Poor dear. He looks very tired, old and gray, but his mouth is set with a firmity as that of a conqueror's. Even in his sleep, he is instinct with resolution. When we have all started, I must take him rest while I drive. I shall tell him that we have days before us, and we must not break down when most of all of his strength will be needed. All is ready. We are off shortly. 2nd October, morning. I was successful, and we took turns driving all night. Now the day is on us, bright, though cold. There is a strange heaviness in the air. I say heaviness for want of a better word. I mean that it is oppressive to us, even to Van Helsing. It is very cold, and only our warm furs keep us comfortable. At dawn, Van Helsing hypnotized me. He says I answered darkness, creaking wood, and roaring water. So the river is changing as they ascend. I do hope that my darling will not run any chance of danger more than need be, but we are in God's hands. 2nd November, night. All day long driving. The country gets wilder as we go, and the great spurs of the Carpathians, which at Varese seem so far from us and so low on the horizon, now seem to gather around us and tower in front. We both seem in good spirits. I think we make an effort to cheer each other. In doing so, we cheer ourselves. Dr. Van Helsing says that by morning we shall reach the Borgo Pass. The houses are very few now, and the professor says that the last horse will have to go on without us, as we will not be able to change. He got 2 in addition to the 2 we changed, so now we have a rude 4 in hand. The dear horses are patient and good, and they give us no trouble. But we are worried with other travelers, and so I can drive. We are not worried with other travelers, and so we can drive. We shall get to the pass by daylight, and we do not want to arrive before. So we take it easy, and we each have a long rest in turn. Oh, what will tomorrow bring us? We go to seek the place where my poor darling suffered so much. God grant that we may be guided aright, and that he will deign to watch over my husband and those dear to us both, who are in such deadly peril. As for me, I am not worthy in his sight. Alas, I am unclean in his eyes, and shall be, until he may deign to let me, stand forth in his sight as one who have not incurred his wrath. Memorandum by Abraham Van Helsing, 4 November. This is to my old and true friend Dr. Seward, M.D., of Purfleet, London, in case I may not see him. It may explain. It is morning, and I write by a fire which will all night have kept me alive, Madam Mina aiding me. It is cold, so cold that the grey heavy sky is full of snow, which, when it falls, will settle for all our winter as the ground is hardening to receive it. It seems to have affected Madam Mina. She has been so heavy of head all day that she was not like herself. She sleeps and sleeps and sleeps. She, as usual, so alert, have done literally nothing all day. She even have lost her appetite. She make no entry into her little diary, she who writes so faithful at every pause. Something whisper to me that all is not well. However, tonight she is more vive. Her long sleep all day have refreshed and restored her, and now she is all sweet and bright than ever. At sunset I try to hypnotize her, but alas, with no effect. The power has grown less and less each day, and tonight it failed me altogether. Well, God's will be done, whatever it may be, whither there forever it may lead. Now to the historical. As for Madam Mina not write in her stenography, I must, in my cumbrous old fashion, that so much day to us may not go unrecorded. We got to the Borgo Pass just after sunrise yesterday morning. When I saw the signs of the dawn, I got ready for the hypnotism. We stopped our carriage and got down so there might be no disturbance. I made a couch with furs, and Madam Mina, lying down, yielded herself as usual, but more slow and short time than ever to hypnotic sleep. As before came the answer, darkness and the swirling of water. Then she woke, bright and radiant, and we go on our way as soon as we reach the pass. At this time and place, she became all on fire with zeal. Some new guiding power in her manifested, for she point to the road and say, "This is the way." How do you know it, I ask. Of course I know it, she answered, and with a pause add, Have not my Jonathan travelled it and wrote it in his travel? At first I think somewhat strange, but soon I see that there is only one such by-road. It is used but little, and very different from the coach road from Bokvinia to Britz, which is more wide and hard, and more of use. So we came down this road, when we met other ways. Not always were we sure where they were roads at all, for they be neglect, and light snow have fallen. The horses know, and they only. I give rein to them, and so on go patient. By and by we find all the things which Jonathan have noted in that wonderful diary of him. Then we go on for long, long hours. At first I tell Madam Mina to sleep. She try, and succeed. She sleep all the time, till at last I feel myself to suspicions grow, and attempt to wake her, but she sleep on. I may not wake her, though I try. I do not wish to try too hard, lest I harm her, for I know that she suffer much, and sleep at times be all in all to her. I think to drowse myself, but all of a sudden I feel guilt, as though I have done something. I find myself bolt up with the reins in hand, and the good horses go along, jog, jog, just as ever. I look down and find Madam Mina still asleep. It is now not far off sunset time, and over the slough the light of the sun flow in big yellow flood. So now we throw great long shadow on where the mountain rise so steep. For we are now going up and up. It all is, oh, so wild and rocky. It is, we are at the end of the world. I then arouse Madam Mina. This time she wake with not much trouble, and then I try to put her into hypnotic sleep, but she sleep not, being as though I were not. Still I try and try, till all at once I find her and myself in dark. So I look around, and find that the sun have gone down. Madam Mina laugh, and I turn and look at her. She is now quite awake, and looks so well as I never saw her since that night at Carfax when we first enter the Count's house. I am amazed, and not at ease then, but she is so bright and tender and thoughtful for me that I forget all fear. I light a fire, for we have brought supply of wood with us, and we prepare food while I undo the horses and set them, tethered in shelter, to feed. Then I return to the fire. She have supper at the ready. I go to help her, but she smile and tell me that she have eat already, that she was so hungry that she would not wait. I like it not. I have grave doubts, but I fear to affright her, and so I am silent about it. She helped me, and I eat alone, and then we wrap in fur and lie beside the fire. I tell her to sleep while I watch, but presently I forget all of watching. When I suddenly remember that I watch, I find her lying quiet, but awake, and looking at me with so bright eyes. Once, twice more, the same occur. I get much sleep till before morning, when I wake and try to hypnotize her, but alas, though she shut her eyes obedient, she may not sleep. The sun rise up, up, and up, and then sleep come to her too late, but so heavy that she still not wake. I have to lift her up and place her sleeping in the carriage, when I have harnessed the horses and made all ready. Madam still asleep, and she took her sleep more healthily and more readier than before. And I like it not. I am afraid. Afraid, afraid, afraid. I am afraid of all things. Even to think I must go on my way. The stake we play for this is life and death, or more than these, and we must not flinch. 5 November, morning. Let me be accurate in everything. For though you and I have seen some strange things together, you may think first that I, Van Helsing, am mad, that the many horrors and so long strain on nerves have at last turned my brain. All yesterday we travel, ever getting closer to the mountains, moving into a more and more wild desert land. There are great frowning precipices and much falling water, and nature seemed to have held some time her carnival. Madam Mina is still asleep and sleep, and though I did have hunger, and appeased it, I could not waken her, even for food. I began to fear that the fatal spell of the place was upon her. tainted as she was by that vampire baptism. Well, I said to myself, if it be that she sleep all day, it shall also be that I do not sleep at night. As we travel on the road, for a road of an ancient and imperfect kind it was, I held down my head and slept. Again I waked with a sense of guilt and of time past, and found Madam Mina still sleeping, and the sun low down. But all was indeed changed. The frowning mountains seemed further away, and we were near the top of a steep rising hill, on the summit of which was such a castle as Jonathan tell in his diary. At once I exulted and feared, for now, good or ill, the end was near. I woke Madam Mina and tried again to hypnotize her, but alas, unavailing till too late. Then, ere the great dark came on us, for even after sundown the heavens reflected the gone sun on the snow, and all for the time in a great twilight. I took out the horses and fed them in what shelter I could. Then I make fire, and near it I make Madam Mina, now awake and more charming than ever, sit amidst her rugs. I got ready food, but she would not eat, simply saying that she had not hunger. I did not press her, knowing her unavailingness. But I myself eat, for I must needs now be strong for all. Then, with the fear on me of what might be, I drew a ring so big for her comfort, round where Madam Mina sat, and over the ring I passed some of the wafer, and I broke it fine, so that it all was well guarded. She sat still all the time, so still as one dead, and she grew whiter, and even whiter, till the snow was not more pale, and no word she said. But when I drew near, she clung to me, and I know the poor soul shook her from head to feet with a tremor that was pain to feel. I said to her presently, when she had grown more quiet, "Will you not come over to the fire?" For I wished to make a test of what she could. She rose obedient, but when she made a step, she stopped, and stood as one stricken. "Why not go on?" I asked. She shook her head, coming back, sat down in her place. Then, looking at me with open eyes, as if one waked from a sleep, she said simply, "I cannot," and remained silent. I rejoiced, for I knew that she could not. None of those that we dreaded could. Though there might be danger to her body, yet her soul was safe. Presently the horses began to scream, and tore at their tethers till I came to them and quieted them. When they did feel my hands in them, they whinnied low as in joy, and licked at my hands, and were quite tame for a time. Many times, though, the night did come to them, till it arrived to the cold hour when all nature is at its lowest, and every time my coming was with quiet of them. In the cold hour the fire began to die, and I was about stepping forth to replenish it, for now the snow came in flying sweeps, and with it a chill mist. Even in the dark there was a light of some kind, as there ever is over snow, and it seemed as though the snow flurries and the wreaths of mist took shape as of women with trailing garments. All was in dead, grim silence, only that the horses whinnied and cowered, as if in terror of the worst. I began to fear horrible fears, but then came to me the sense of safety that in the ring within I stood. I began, too, to think that my imaginings were of the night, and the gloom, and the unrest that have gone through, and all the terrible anxiety. It was as though my memories of all Jonathan's horrid experiences were befooling me, for the snowflakes and mist began to wheel and circle about, till I could get as though a snowy glimpse of those women who would have kissed him. And then the horses cowered lower and lower, moaned in terror as men do in pain. Even the madness of fright was naught to them, so they could break away. I feared for my dear Madam Mina, when these weird figures drew near and circled around. I looked at her, but she sat calm and smiled at me. When I would have stepped to the fire to replenishment, she caught me and held me back, and whispered, like a voice that one hears in a dream, so low as it was, "No, no, do not go without. Here you are safe." I turned to her, and looking in her eyes, and said, But you, it is for you that I fear. Whereat she laughed, a laugh low and unreal, and said, Fear from me? Why fear from me? None safer in all the world from them than I am. And as I wondered the meaning of her words, a puff of wind made the flame leap up, and I see the red scar on her forehead. Then, alas, I knew. Did I not? I would have soon learned, for the wheeling figures of mist and snow came closer, but keeping ever out of the holy circle. And they began to materialize till, if God did not take away my reason, for I saw through my eyes, there before me, in actual flesh, the same three women that Jonathan saw in the room, when they would have kissed his throat. I knew the swaying round forms, their bright hard eyes, the white teeth, the ruddy color, the voluminous lips. They smiled ever at poor Madame Mina, and as their laugh came through the silence of the night, they twined their arms and pointed to her, and said in those sweet tingling tones that Jonathan said were of intolerable sweetness of the water glasses, Come, sister, come to us. Come, come. In fear I turned to my poor Madame Mina, and with my heart with gladness leapt like flame, for oh, the terror in her sweet eyes, the repulsion, the horror, told a story to my heart that was all of hope. God be thanked she was not yet of them. I seized some of the firewood which was by me, and holding out some of the wafer, advanced on them towards through the fire. They drew back before me, and laughed their low, horrid laugh. I fed the fire, and feared them not, for I knew that we were safe within our protections. They could not approach me while so armed, nor Madame Mina while she remained within the ring, which she could not leave no more than they could enter. The horses had ceased to moan, and they lay still on the ground. The snow fell on them softly, and they grew whiter. I knew that there was, for the poor beasts, no more of terror. And so we remained till the red of dawn to fall through the snow gloom. I was desolate and afraid, and full of woe and terror. But when the beautiful sun began to climb the horizon, life was to me again. At the first coming of the dawn, the horrid figures melted in the whirling mist and snow. The wreaths of transparent gloom moved away towards the castle and were lost. Instinctively, with the dawn coming, I turned to Madame Mina, intending to hypnotize her, but she lay in a deep and sudden sleep, from which I could not wake her. I tried to hypnotize her through sleep, but she made no response, none at all, and the day broke. I fear yet to stir. I have made my fire and seen the horses. They are all dead. Today, I have much to do here. I keep waiting till the sun is up high, for there may be places where I must go, where that sunlight through snow and mist obscure it will be to me a safety. I will strengthen me with breakfast, and then I will to my terrible work. Madame Mina sleeps, God be thanked. She is calm in her sleep. Jonathan Harker's Journal. 4th November, evening. The accident to the launch had been a terrible thing to us. Only for it we should have overtaken the boat long ago, and by now my dear Mina would be free. I fear to think of her, off on her worlds near the horrid place. We have got horses, and we follow on the track. I know that whilst Godelmang is getting ready, we have our arms. The Sanjay just look out if they mean fight. Oh, if only Morris and Seward were with us. We must hope. If I write no more, goodbye, Mina. God bless and keep you. Dr. Seward's Diary, 5th November. With the dawn, we saw the body of Sanjay before us, dashing away from the river with the litter wagon. They surrounded it in a cluster and hurried along as though beset. The snow is falling lightly, and there is a strange excitement in the air. It may be our own feelings, but the desperation and depression is strange. Far off, I hear the howling of wolves. The snow brings them down from the mountains, and there are dangers to all of us, and from all sides. The horses are nearly ready, and we are soon off. We ride to death for someone. God alone knows who, or where, or what, or when, or how it may be. Dr. Van Helsing's Memorandum, 5th November, afternoon. I am at least sane. Thank God for that mercy. At all events, through the providing, it has been dreadful. When I left Madame Mina sleeping within the Holy Circle, I took my way to the castle. The blacksmith hammer, which I took in the carriage from Verisi, was useful. Though the doors were all open, I broke them off the rusty hinges, lest some ill intent or ill chance should close them, so that being entered I might not get out. Jonathan's bitter experience served me here. My memory of his diary, I found my way to the old chapel, for I knew that's where my work lay. The air was oppressive. It seemed as if there was a sulphurous fume, which at times made me dizzy. Either was a roaring in my ears, or I heard afar the howl of wolves. Then bethought me of my dear Madame Mina, and I was in terrible plight. The dilemma had me between his horns. Her I had not dared to take into this place, but left safe from the vampire in the Holy Circle, and yet even there would be the wolf. I resolved me that my work lay here, and that it was to the wolves we must submit. If it were God's will, at any rate, it was only death and freedom beyond. So I did choose for her. Had it but been for myself, the chance had been easy. The maw of the wolf were better to rest than the grave of the vampire. So I make my choice and go on with my work. I know that there are at least 3 graves to find, graves that are in habit. So I search and search and search, and I find one of them. She lay in her vampire sleep, so full of life and voluptuous beauty that I shuddered as though I come to murder. Ah, I doubt not that in old time, when such things were, many a man who set forth to do such a task as mine, found at the last moment his heart failing, and then his nerve. So he delay, and delay, and delay, till the mere beauty and the fascination of the wanton undead have hypnotized him, and he remain on and on till sunset come, and the vampire sleep be over. Then the beautiful eyes of the fair woman open, and look love, and the voluptuous mouth present to a kiss, and man is weak. And there remain one more victim in the vampire fold, one more to swell the grim and grisly ranks of the undead. There is some fascination, surely, when I am moved by the mere presence of such a one, even laying as she lay in a tomb, fretted with age and heavy with the dust of centuries, though there may be that horrid odor such that as the lairs the Count have had. Yes, I was moved. I, Van Helsing, with all my purpose, with my motive for hate, I was moved to a yearning for delay, which seemed to paralyze my faculties and clog my very soul. It may have been that the need of natural sleep and the strange oppression of the air were beginning to overcome me. Certain it was that I was lapsing into sleep, the open-eyed sleep of one who yields to a sweet fascination, when there came through the snow-steeled air a long, low wail, so full of woe and pity that it woke me like the sound of a clarion, for it was the voice of my dear Madame Mina I heard. I then braced myself to my horrid task, and found by wrenching away the tomb tops one other of the sisters, and another dark one. I dared not pause to look on her, for I had on her sister, lest one more I should begin to be enthralled. But I go on searching, until presently I find in a high great tomb, as if made to one much beloved, that her fair sister, which, like Jonathan, I had seen to gather herself out of atoms of mist. She was so fair to look on, so radiantly beautiful, so exquisitely voluptuous, that the very instinct of man in me, which calls some of my very sex to love and protect one of hers, made my head whirl with new emotion. But God be thanked, that soul wail of my dear Madame Mina had not died out of my ears. Before the spell could be wrought further upon me, I had nerved myself to my wild work. By this time I had searched all of the tombs in the chapel. So far as I could tell, as there had been only 3 of these undead phantoms around us at night, I took it that there were no more of active undead extant. There was one great tomb, more lordly than all the rest. Huge it was, and nobly proportioned. On it but one word: Dracula. Then, this was the undead home of the king vampire, to whom so many were due. Its emptiness spoke eloquent to make certain what I knew. Before I began to restore these women to their dead selves through my awful work, I laid in Dracula's tomb some of the wafer, and so banished him from it, undead forever. Then began my terrible task, and I dreaded it. But it had but been but one. It had been easy, comparative. But three? I began, and twice more after, I had been through the deed of horror. For it was terrible with the sweet Miss Lucy, but it would not be with these strange ones who had survived through centuries, and who had strengthened by the passing of years, who would, if they could, have fought for their very foul lives. Oh, my friend John, but it is butcher work. I had not been nerved by the thoughts of other dead, and of other living whom hung shall appall of fear, I could not have gone on. I tremble and tremble even yet, though till it was all over. God be thanked, my nerve did stand. Had I not seen the repose in the first place, and the gladness that stole over it ere the final dissolution came, my realization that the soul had been won, I could not have gone further with my butchery. I could not have endured the horrid screeching as the stake drove home, the plunging and writhing of form, the lips of bloody foam. I could have fled in horror and left my work undone, but it is over, and the poor souls, I can pity them now and weep, as I think of them placid, each in their full sleep of death, for a short moment, ere fading. For friend John, hardly had my knife severed the head of each before the whole body began to melt away and crumble into its native dust, as though the death should have come centuries agone, and at last assert itself, and say once and aloud, I am here. Before I left the castle, I was so fixed its entrances that never more can the Count enter there as undead. When I stepped into the circle where Madame Mina slept, she woke from her sleep, and, seeing me, cried out in pain that I endured so much. Come, she said, come away from this awful place. Let us go to meet my husband, who is, I know, coming towards us. She was looking thin and pale and weak, but her eyes were pure and glowed with fervor. I was glad to see her paleness and her illness, for my mind was full of the fresh horror of that ruddy vampire sleep. So, with trust and hope, and yet full of fear, we go eastward to meet our friends, and him, whom Madame Mina tells me that she know are coming to meet us. Mina Harker's Journal, 6 November. It was late in the afternoon when the professor and I took our way towards the east, whence I saw Jonathan was coming. We did not go fast, though the way was steeply downhill, for we had to take heavy rugs and wraps with us, and dared not face the possibility of being left without warmth in the cold and the snow. We had to take some of our provisions too, for we were in perfect desolation, and so far as we could see through the snowfall, there was not even the sign of habitation. When we had gone about a mile, I was tired with the heavy walking and sat down to rest. And then we looked back and saw the clear line of Dracula's castle cut the sky, where we were so deep under the hill whereupon it was set that the angle of perspective of the Carpathian Mountains was far below it. We saw it in all its grandeur, perched 1,000 feet on the summit of a sheer precipice, and with seemingly a great gap between it and the steep of the adjacent mountain on any side. There was something wild and uncanny about the place. We could hear the distant howling of wolves. They were far off, but the sound, even though coming muffled through the deadening snowfall, was full of terror. I knew from the way Dr. Van Helsing was searching about that he was trying to seek some strategic point, where we would be less exposed in case of attack. The rough roadway still led downwards, and we could trace it through the drifted snow. In a little while, the professor signaled to me, so I got up and joined him. He had found a wonderful spot, a sort of natural hollow in the rock, with an entrance like a doorway between two boulders. He took me by the hand and drew me in. "See," he said, "here you will be in shelter, and if the wolves do come, I can meet them one by one." He brought in our furs and made a snug nest for me, then got out some provision and forced them upon me, but I could not eat. To even try to do so was repulsive to me, and much as I would like to have pleased him, I could not bring myself to attempt. He looked very sad, but did not reproach me. Taking his field glasses from the case, he stood out on top of the rock and began to search the horizon. Suddenly he called out, "Look, Madam Mina! Look, look!" I sprang up and stood beside him on the rock. He handed me his glasses and pointed. The snow was now falling more heavily, and swirled about fiercely, for a high wind was beginning to blow. However, there were times when there were pauses between the snow flurries, and I could see a long way around. From the height where we were, it was possible to see a great distance, and far off, beyond the white waste of snow, I could see the river lying like a black ribbon in kinks and curls that wound its way. Straight in front of us, and not far off in fact, so near that I wondered why we had not noticed it before, came a group of mounted men hurrying along. In the midst of them was a cart, a long letter wagon, which swept from side to side, like a dog's tail wagging, with each stern inequality of the road. Outlined against the snow as they were, I could see from the men's clothes that they were peasants or gypsies of some kind. On the cart was a great square chest. My heart leapt as I saw it, for I felt that the end was coming. The evening was now drawing close, and well I knew that at sunset, the thing, which was still imprisoned there, would take new freedom, and could, in any of its forms, elude all pursuit. In fear, I turned to the professor. To my consternation, however, he was not there. An instant later I saw him below me, around the rock. He had drawn a circle, such as we had found shelter last night. When he had completed it, he stood beside me again, saying, "At least you shall be safe here from him." He took the glasses from me, and in the next lull of the snow, swept the whole place below us. "See," he said, "they come quickly. They are flogging their horses and galloping as hard as they can." He paused and went on in a hollow voice. "They are racing for the sunset. We may be too late. God's will be done." Down came another blinding rush of driving snow, and the whole landscape was blotted out. It soon passed, however, and once more his glasses were fixed on the plain. There came a sudden cry. "Look! Look! Look! See 2 horsemen follow fast, coming up from the south. It must be Quincy and John. Take the glass. Look before the snow blots it all out." I took it and looked. The 2 men might be Dr. Seward and Mr. Morris. I knew at all events that neither of them was Jonathan. At the same time, I knew that Jonathan was not far off. Looking around, I saw on the north side of the coming party 2 other men, riding at breakneck speed. One of them I knew was Jonathan, and the other I took of course, to be Lord Godalming. They, too, were pursuing the party with the cart. When I told the professor, he shouted in glee like a schoolboy, and after looking intently till a snowfall made sight impossible, he laid his Winchester rifle ready for use against the boulder at the opening of our shelter. "They are all converging," he said. "When the time comes, we shall have the gypsies on all sides." I got out my revolver ready to hand, for whilst we were speaking, the howling of wolves came louder and closer. When the snowstorm abated a moment, we looked again. It was strange to see the snow falling in such lovely flakes close to us, and beyond, the sun shining more and more brightly as it sank down towards the far mountain tops. Sweeping the glass all around us, I could see here and there dots moving slightly in 2s and 3s in larger numbers. The wolves were gathering for their prey. Every instant seemed an age whilst we waited. The wind came now in fierce bursts, and the snow was driven with fury as it swept on us in circling eddies. At times we could not see an arm's length before us, but at others, as the howl-sounding wind swept by us, it seemed to clear the airspace around us so that we could see far off. We had of late been so unaccustomed to watch for sunrise and sunset that we knew with fair acuity when it would be. We knew that before long the sun would set. It was hard to believe that by our watches it was less than an hour, that we waited in that rocky shelter before various bodies began to converge close upon us. The wind came now with fiercer and more bitter sweeps, and more steadily from the north. It seemingly had driven the snow clouds from us, for, with only occasional bursts, the snow fell. We could distinguish clearly the individuals of each party, the pursued and the pursuers. Strangely enough, those pursued did not seem to realize, or at least to care, that they were pursued. They seemed, however, to hasten with redoubled speed as the sun dropped closer, lower and lower, to the mountains. Closer and closer they drew. The professor and I crouched down behind the rock and held our weapons ready. I could see that he was determined that they should not pass. One and all were quiet, unaware of our presence. All at once 2 voices shouted out, "Halt!" One was my Jonathan's, raised in a high key of passion, the other Mr. Morris's, strong, resolute tone of quiet command. The gypsies may not have known the language, but there was no mistaking the tone, in whatever tongue the words were spoken. Instinctively they reined in, and at that instant Lord Godalming and Jonathan dashed up at one side and Dr. Stewart and Mr. Morris on the other. The leader of the gypsies, a splendid-looking fellow who sat his horse like a centaur, waved them back, and a fierce voice gave to his companions some word to proceed. They lashed the horses, which sprang forward, but the 4 men raised up their Winchester rifles in an unmistakable way to command them to stop. At the same moment, Dr. Van Helsing and I rose from behind the rock and pointed our weapons at them. Seeing that they were surrounded, the men tightened their reins and drew up. The leader turned to them and gave a word at which every man of the gypsy drew what weapon they carried, knife or pistol, and held themselves in readiness to attack. Issue was jointed in an instant. The leader, with a quick movement of his rein, threw his horse out in front, and pointing first to the sun, now close to the hilltops, and then to the castle, said something which I did not understand. For answer, all 4 men of our party threw themselves from their horses and dashed towards the cart. I should have felt terrible fear at seeing Jonathan in such danger, but the ardor of battle must have been upon me, as well as the rest of them. I felt no fear, but only a wild, surging desire to do something. Seeing the quick movement of our parties, the leader of the gypsies gave a command. His men instantly formed around the cart in a sort of undisciplined endeavor, each one shouldering and pushing the other in his eagerness to carry out the order. In the midst of this, I could see that Jonathan on one side of the ring of men and Quincy on the other were forcing a way to the cart. It was evident that they were bent on finishing their task before the sun could set. Nothing seemed to stop or even hinder them. Neither the leveled weapons nor the flashing of knives of the gypsies in front, nor the howling of the wolves behind, apparent to even to attract theirs attention. Jonathan's impetuosity and the manifest singleness of his purpose seemed to overawe those in front of him. Instinctively they cowered aside and let him pass. In an instant he had jumped upon the cart, and with a strength which seemed incredible, raised the great box and flung it over the wheel to the ground. In the meantime, Mr. Morris had to use force to pass through his side of the ring of Sanjay. All the same, I had been breathlessly watching Jonathan with the tail of my eye, seeing him pressing desperately forward, and had seen the knives of the gypsies flash as he won his way through them, and they cut at him. He had parried with his great bowie knife, and at first I thought that he too had come through safely. But as he sprang beside Jonathan, who by now had jumped from the cart, I could see his left hand was clutching at his side, and that blood was spurting through his fingers. He did not delay notwithstanding this, for as Jonathan, with desperate energy, attacked one end of the chest, attempting to prise off the lid with a great kukri knife, he attacked the other frantically with his bowie. Under the efforts of both men, the lid began to yield. The nails drew with a quick screeching sound, and the top of the box was thrown back. By the time the gypsies, seeing themselves covered by the Winchesters and at the mercy of Lord Godalming and Dr. Seward, had given in and made no resistance. The sun was almost down on the mountain tops, and the shadows of the whole group fell upon the snow. I saw the Count lying within the box upon the earth, some of which the root falling from the cart had scattered over him. He was deathly pale, just like a waxen image, and the red eyes glared with the horrible vindictive look which I knew too well. As I looked, on the eyes I saw the sinking sun, and the look of hate in them turned to triumph. But on the instant came the sweep and the flash of Jonathan's great knife. I shrieked as I saw it shear through the throat, whilst at the same time Mr. Morris' Bowie knife plunged into the heart. It was like a miracle, but before our very eyes, and almost in the drawing of a breath, the whole body crumbled into dust and passed from our sight. I shall be glad as long as I live that even in that moment of final dissolution there was a look of peace, such as I never could have imagined might have rested there. The castle of Dracula now stood out against the red sky, and every stone of its broken battlements was articulated against the light of the setting sun. The gypsies, taking us as in some way the cause of the extraordinary disappearance of the dead man, turned, without a word, and rode away as if for their lives. Those who were unmounted jumped upon the letter wagon and shouted to the horsemen not to desert them. The wolves, which had withdrawn to a safe distance, followed in their wake, leaving us alone. Mr. Morris, who had sunk to the ground, leaned on his elbow, holding his hand pressed to his side. The blood still gushed through his fingers. I flew to him, for the holy circle did not now keep me back. So did the two doctors. Jonathan knelt behind him, and the wounded man lay back his head on his shoulder. With a sigh he took, with a terrible effort, my hand in his own, which was unstained. He must have seen the anguish of my heart in my face, and he smiled to me and said, "I am only too happy to be of service. Oh God." He cried suddenly, struggling up to a sitting posture and pointing to me. "It was worth it for this to die. Look, look." The sun was now right down upon us on the mountain top, and the red gleams fell upon my face, so that it bathed in rosy light. With one impulse, the men sank on their knees, and in a deep and earnest amen broke from all their eyes, followed the pointing of his finger. The dying man spoke. "Now, God be thanked, for all was not in vain. See, the snow is not more stainless than her forehead. The curse has passed away." And to our bitter grief, with a smile and in silence, he died, a gallant gentleman. Note: 7 years ago, we all went through the flames, and the happiness of us since then, we think, well worth the pain we endured. It is an added joy to Mina and to me that our boy's birthday is the same day on which Quincy Morris died. His mother holds, I know, the secret belief that some of our brave friend's spirit had passed into him. His bundle of names links all our little band of men together, but we call him Quincy. In the summer of this year, we made a journey to Transylvania, and went over the old ground, which was and is, to us still, full of vivid and terrible memories. It was almost impossible to believe that the things which had seen with our own eyes and heard with our own ears were living truths. Every trace of all that had been was blotted out. The castle stood as before, reared high above a waste of desolation. But then, when we got home, we were talking of the old time, which we could all look back on without despair, for Godalming and Seward were both happily married. I took the papers from the safe, where they had been since our return so long ago, and were struck with the fact that in all the mass of material of the which record is composed, there is hardly one authentic document, nothing but a mass of typewriting, except the latter notebooks of Mina and Seward and myself, and Van Helsing's memorandum. We could hardly ask anyone, even did we wish to accept these as proof of so wild a story. Van Helsing summed it up, it all, as he said, with our boy on his knee. "We want no proofs. We ask none to believe us. This boy will someday know that a brave man and a gallant woman his mother is. Already he knows her sweetness and loving care. Later on he will understand how some men so loved her that they did dare much for her sake." Jonathan Harker. The end. that, our tale comes to a close, folks. I want to thank Ryan for providing all through this a magnificent ambiance to bring this story to life. And I want to thank all of you listeners out there. I hope that this has been as thrilling a journey for you as it was for us. But fear not, though this story may be over, more will be on the way. I have a feeling that the next one we might take a slightly lighter tone for the next one. I won't give away the whole story, but I'm thinking I could use a drink in a bar in upstate New York. What do you think, Ryan? Yeah. Two scotches, neat. But until then, folks, from all of us here at VFR, we wish you safeness and happiness. Until next time, have a good night.